if you look at the budget of 7.3 trillion, you observe that the capital expenditure element of it is only 2.24 trillion. The budget deficit is 2.36 trillion. Funding is going to come from about 2.32 trillion. So in effect, the entire government revenue is going to be spent on debt service and recorded expenditure. So that means the investment into productive asset capital will be minimal. It's only contingent that the government taking from the public. So you find out that the 2.24 trillion, 1.254 trillion will be borrowed locally. And we're already seeing an economic environment where the private sector has been hemmed at one corner, we are being crowded out. So the government's ability to invest any kobo in infrastructure is dependent on, one, achieving the budgeted revenue. And unfortunately, the impact of the current expenditure on economic development, on pulling the economy out of the recession is minimal because of the structure of our economy. So we have to look at the structure of the economy. Today, the country has very low productive capacity. So the current expenditure does not go into stimulating productive activities. And that is why we make reference to the current expenditure going to stimulate consumption and import, because we do not have existing productive capacity. So if you have a budget structure that the government ability to invest in capital assets is only dependent on achieving 100% of recurrent or this revenue, which we know is almost impossible, then the likelihood that significant capital will be invested in infrastructure is minimal. So we're not going to see the expected impact of a 7.3 trillion budget unless the structure of that budget changes. Then they also debunk one fallacy that the government seems to be building on, and that is that government expenditure is capable of stimulating economic growth and development of this country. Because if you look at the budget, you will realize that the budget accounts for 6.5% of our GDP. If you even go down to if you compute Nigerian GDP using the expenditure method, and you look at the disposable income approach, you find out that government expenditure only 4.4% of our disposable income. The private sector accounts for 54%. And the private sector is at the receiving end of the economic policies. So I think we have to start from the macroeconomic orientation of the government. And that is to say that the government has to change its belief that the public sector will drive economic growth. As it stands today, the private sector in Nigeria is at the throes of death. I don't know if any of you is not feeling it, but I'm feeling it. We have developed an economic system that discourages productive activities. You must be a daft person to have 100 million today and go and use that 100 million to set up a productive venture, when you can collect 18.6 million and go to a club every morning and play golf. So we need to address that orientation. And that will now help the government to evolve a system that will allow the private sector to build those infrastructure the government is trying to build. Today, the government has, if you look at the capital expenditure budget, you find out that about 524 billion is for power, works, and housing. If you share it, okay, if you look at the works about 300 billion. But look at one single project. On the Enugu Expressway, in 2014, they had a cost profile of 150 billion. So if the government is going to spend that thing, it will only build one road, and with the devaluation of the currency, 150 billion will no longer do that project. We had a second Niger bridge that was supposed to build under a PPP scheme. I tried to reach Uche to confirm, are we still building that project under the PPP scheme? Because I hear government saying we have voted money for the second Niger bridge. It looks like the original concept of bringing the private sector to build that as a proof of concept has been overturned. We know that the government does not have, if the government spends money for the next 100 years. We're not going to ever develop this country if we're going to rely on government to build infrastructure. But the orientation today and the business model we have in the budget is that the government will build infrastructure. But that is fallacious. So the growth we want in this economy, we have to be private sector driven. The expenditure we have in the budget, I can assure you, as long as it's recurrent, it does not improve the productive capacity of the economy, will certainly drive inflation and the further devaluation. Because if the government spends the money we have, about 7.3 trillion, on recurrent expenditure, paying salaries and all the rest. So unless we change the structure of the budget, we change the structure of the economic framework, we change the orientation of the government as it relates to who will drive economic development, we're not going to see that growth. We might, yes, certainly come out of recession. It's very simple. Coming out of recession is no big deal. Agriculture accounts for 28% of our GDP. Agriculture grew by about 4% in third quarter. So, and the government is subsidizing agriculture. Government is providing funding to agriculture sector at 9%. If you have an economic framework where the private sector, other private sector operators, you and I can borrow at 9% or 10%, we're going to be profitable. Those sectors will grow. So if we have subsidized agriculture by providing them cheap funding, and the agriculture sector is the only one growing, then we should be able to latch on to that. And say it simply means that if we also provide funding to other sectors of the economy at lower cost, then they have the possibility to grow. If we do not provide infrastructure, if we do not allow for an economic environment where the government, people can borrow at a reasonable rate, I wouldn't know how the economy will recover. Recovering at 1%, 1.2%, when your population is growing at about 3%, the level of poverty will keep increasing. I looked at December edition of Harvard Business Review. Nigeria has fallen out of emerging markets and even fallen out of frontier markets. They identified 25 countries as frontier economies. And those economies are economies that are growing at 5% and above. If your economy is not growing, foreign direct investors will not come. It's no-brainer. Nobody puts money in an economy that is contracting. So we must restore economic growth to the level that will be appealing. Why would a private foreign portfolio investor go to an economy that is contracting? You need to have internal growth. I'm happy with what Dr. Adedipe said. We need to look at the structure that will allow the economy to start growing on its own, then before become attractive to foreigners to invest in the economy. Nobody takes its money and goes to an economy that is declining.